Anxiety, it's one of the biggest words we hear in sentences when we talk about menopause. It's probably up there with brain fog. And I think, Deirdre, when we look at anxiety, it's such a loaded word. And
Yes.
I think for anyone at any stage in life, not just in menopause, it can mean many different things. But when you work with people who, are anxious and different forms of anxiety, how do you look at it in terms of it's so big?
Yeah. I suppose the first thing I would say about it, Catherine, is to see it as an emotion. It's one of the many emotions we can feel at that particular phase in life, but throughout life, anxiety is one of our emotions, and understanding what emotions are and how they show up for us, I suppose, is a really important thing that we can do to help us manage it better. So, we have anxiety, we have fears, we have sadness, we have joy, and, we have anger, and we've all sorts of flavors of those and different words that come to mind. Anger, you can go frustration or irritability. So there, almost if you think of them on a scale between 0 and 10, emotions can have such a range, as you say. We can be doing okay in life and anxiety might be there humming in the background in our 20s and 30s at a 3 or a 4. And all of a sudden, when we're in menopause, it's like an 8 or a 9, and it's like blaring at us, and thinking and feeling and having other emotions actually can get quite blocked out by anxiety. It can become an overriding emotion. And I suppose that's when, in menopause, when that happens, it's time to maybe take a step back and have a look at it and see what's going on for the individual.
And when it does become like an overriding emotion, like how do you know that? How do you know, like, what are you looking out for?
So I suppose, Catherine, what comes to mind when you say that is I've been to a number of your menopause success summits, and I'm
Good
really looking
woman.
forward to the next one. And I remember one of the speakers talking about symptoms being mild, moderate, or severe. And again, I suppose that kind of approach, if you think about your own anxiety or your own emotional responses to situations, is if you can take a step back and go, is my response kind of moderate? Or, is it mild? Do I feel like, okay, for what went on, that was okay? Or do I feel like when I take a step back, that was way too much? That was out of kilter. I know that the children or the husband is driving me mad, but okay, maybe I lost it a little bit more than I should have. Or, I have an upcoming event, be it planning for holidays or a wedding or, some sort of transition in life, and that it becomes all consuming and it's hard to think about anything else. And it's hard to put it into perspective to say, okay, yes, it's something to have concern about, but I can handle it or I can manage it. If you find that your thinking about it is excessive or it's taking over your thoughts, then you're in that kind of more moderate to severe category, maybe, a 7, 8, 9, 10 sense of anxiety. And I suppose that's when I would be saying, how do you manage and figure out ways of managing and soothing yourself, maybe internally or externally, or seeking help. That's the time to maybe look at that sort of thing.
And just when you mentioned there, the reaction, it's disproportionate, right? And
Yeah.
really reminded me, I was talking to a woman and she was sharing with me how when they were going on family holidays, she said she was over preparing. She said she was getting them to the airport like maybe 4 or 5 hours before they needed to be there
Yeah.
because she had started to become more anxious about it. And she said that's where she really realized, listen, there's something not right here. But then it wasn't just impacting her, it was impacting her whole family because she was kind
Yeah.
of, getting them up hours earlier or whatever to be at the airport hours earlier when there was no need to be. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes you can, particularly when you're in the throes of many other symptoms of menopause, you can like kind of lose sight of what's normal, can't you? You
Yes,
know.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose what's normal for each person is going to vary. So I would say our emotions and our responses to what is happening to us kind of come from three different streams. One is our DNA, how we're born and how we're made up of, and the personality traits, kind of like our face and our mannerisms that we inherit from our mum, dad, our grandparents. People say, oh, you hold your hands the very same as your Auntie Mary or whatever it is. So same is true of our emotional responses. There's definitely a DNA part to it. The second part to how our emotions is our early lives. And again, this is very much borne out in research that patterns we lay down and experiences we have in early life carry through in later life. And sometimes we recognize that they're good for us, and sometimes we recognize they're not, and we evolve. So it's not that they're hardcore by
Mhm.
what we experience in our life, but they certainly make a difference. I'm going to take, for example, our accents. You and I are from the great county of Kilkenny, and, we have a lovely Kilkenny accent and
Flat,
dialect. And
flat.
flat. And, if we were born in France, we would have a different language and accent. So, again, to show that the environment that you're in those early stages is very informative. It's quite hard to break your accent. You
Mm.
can, but you have to be very intentional about it. You have to put practice into it. Actors and actresses do this. If you want to change something that is a pattern of yours, it does take focus and effort and attention. And then I would say the third thing is our current environment. And that current environment is the people around us, where we live, how we are in it, whether we're working or not working, children or not children, and our chemical and biological makeup in that at that period in life, whether we're well or not.
Mm.
If you've chronic pain, your psychological way you are at that time will be different. If your hormones are changing due to drops in estrogen, again, that's an environmental change. Yes, it's within and not external, but it's still something that we now know affects people's emotional state during menopause. So all of those factors are influences, and I suppose understanding ourselves and
Mm.
where we might have triggers is complex, because we are human and it is complex. But also, when you spend time paying attention to it and maybe work with somebody through it, it is easy to see what might need to change and how you might go about it.
Mm. Mm. And I think it's like having that piece of awareness, isn't it? And
Yes.
sometimes, it's like, I talk a lot about the sandwich years, and that's menopause. We're all juggling loads of things. And when you're in the middle of doing that, it's kind of like, okay, well, I don't have time to stop here and think about why am I anxious, or why am I feeling cross or irritable or whatever. But there's great benefit in that, though,
There
isn't
is.
there?
There is. And what I would say to people is, first, to start noticing what's happening in your body. Because a lot of the time we stay up in our head and we don't notice the icky stomach, the butterflies in the stomach, that sense of dread, the sense of, something going wrong, but we have it in our core. But we try and prevent that happening by thinking through, like your friend going to the airport. We're so over prepared that we're trying to calm down these sensations that are in our body, or the tightness in the chest, that, oh, things might go wrong, and we feel it here, but we try to ignore it. So we go up into our head. So anxiety is very head based, a lot of thinking with it. But when we can slow down and actually feel it and maybe take a breath and maybe go, okay, airports are tricky, but, we're not there yet. We're still at
Mm.
home. So right here in this moment, I can look after myself. I can plan. I can get out a piece of paper and say, what do we need to do? What's the
Mm.
work back time and what's reasonable for everybody? so that we are more calm and within our body responding to the situation or the scenario, rather than just in our heads and being overly trying to solve it through just thinking.
That's, I mean, I'd say I probably once a day, if not more, I do have to just remind myself I'm here now. And sometimes I can look at my to-do list and I can think, oh, mother of God, where am I starting? But it's just stopping and, if the sun is shining, it's just, even for me, it's like sitting out in the garden for a minute. I'm
Yeah,
here, I'm now tackling things, one at a time and trying to be in the moment. It's, in a way, it sounds so simple, but I think you and I both know how profound of a change that can trigger in your body and in how you're feeling, right?
absolutely. One of the things that comes up with, some clients says, oh, I get into bed at night and I lie down and it all starts going through my head. And the next thing I know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And I would say, but you need to remind yourself you're in your bed.
Mm.
Right here, right now, I can't do anything about what's going to come up tomorrow.
Mm.
Maybe people are, social anxiety or fearful of the world or fearful of the next conversation they're going to have with somebody. And it's to say, okay, right here, right now, I'm in my house, my front door is closed and I'm safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's really that, that sort of habit of bringing yourself into the present moment, going, okay, right here, right now, what can I do? So can I plan? Can I book a taxi? Can I book a taxi at the foreign end when I get to Italy? And you say, okay, I can do that. I can make a reservation. What if the taxi drivers out there are dodgy? And you go, okay, well, I can't do anything about that
Mm.
now. What if they take me away and something happens? And you go, you have to then learn to trust your judgment in the
Mm.
moment, that if something doesn't feel right, you'll say, no, thanks, I'll get somebody else, or whatever it is. But that often we cope much better in the moment than we perceive we will.
Mm. Yeah.
Even when things go wrong, we actually act in the moment much better than we anticipate we will from a distance. So the
And
catastrophizing is to try and keep us safe,
mm.
but the trick is to trust ourselves that actually we will keep safe and we
Mm.
will be safe in the moment.
And sometimes our brain wants to trick us, doesn't it? Our
Yes.
brain sends us down that tunnel of catastrophizing, that the worst will happen.
Yeah.
And I think often we kind of think, okay, well, our brain is amazing, so our brain must be telling us the truth. But in
Yeah.
actual fact, that's not always the case.
No, that's not the case. Again, this would be very much borne out through psychology research, is that every thought we have is not a fact.
Mm.
And particularly when it comes to other people, every thought we have is not a fact. They're all this. They were out to get me. They were all blaming others for things or anticipating that others are doing things to us. And actually, unless you go and directly ask the person, you don't know. You're making assumptions, but your mind is trying to protect you from the assault of somebody giving out to you
Mm.
verbally, from the, threat of others. Well, if I think they're dangerous and I don't go near them, then I can socially isolate. So it kind of keeps us small, it keeps us withdrawn, it keeps us pulling back. So it's our mind trying to predict safety, but actually sometimes it's a perceived threat rather than a real threat. And in our body, a perceived threat will feel the exact same. Your heart rate will increase. You'll get ready for fight or flight, whichever your body will choose in that moment. And the choice between fight or flight is, if we think that we can overcome something, like if we think we can overcome the tiger because it's a cub, then we will fight. And if we think we can't, we will either flight or freeze. Flight if we think we can run away from it. And then if we think we need to feign death, we will freeze. So very fast, our brain has these protective responses that it chooses one of these things. There's no logical front cortex thinking in this. This is all very back of the head, brain stem thinking that activates us into our safety spaces. So the fight could be giving out to our children, and the flight will be running away from our husband. We know we won't win that argument, so we're out of the room and gone. Instead of maybe if we can be more calm, if we can trust ourselves, if we can trust them, being in the moment and having a constructive conversation, or finding the words to say, I don't feel great, or I'm not doing good at the moment. So it's about trying to regain our composure and take a breath and be present in our adult selves rather than in our safety selves that might actually convey messages that aren't really what we need to convey at that time.
See, there's a few really powerful things you've said there, right, that I just think are really important. And if we can just go back, one thing is where you talk about, the back of the brain and the reaction that's coming. In terms of like that reaction, so our body is primed and we don't really think about that reaction, right? Because it just happens. But can you just explain a little bit more in terms of where's that coming from? Are we talking about, is that coming from our hunter-gatherer, the cave women, from centuries past in survival mode, or what is it?
Yeah, so the knowledge and the understanding in neuroscience and how we are and who we are in the world has just exploded in the last 10 years. And it's wonderful, and it's constantly changing and getting updated. But, how I often talk to clients about this is, we've our iPhone 13 and our Samsung, I'm not sure what number they're on, but our poor brain and the way our brain and body work, it's still on V1. There's been no upgrades, right? So a lot of the functionality in how our brain stem, our amygdala and hypothalamus and our frontal cortex, where our emotions and logic are stored, are the same software as the caveman. Yes, we know an awful lot more in the world and we process them differently, but the chemicals that they release, the way the body activates, these were survival things and tribal things that helped us be and stay alive in the world. So in the womb, the brainstem forms, and it's a very basic functionality. It's on or off. The autonomic nervous system is activated or it's deactivated. We're activated because of threat and danger, or we're deactivated to rest and digest. And actually that activation means that rush of blood away from the stomach to the arms and legs, and get ourselves out of danger. And then rest and digest, calm down, food goes in to nourish the body, breathing slows down, and we're able to go on about our daily lives. And that's why the stomach is often an area that's activated, because the blood rushes away. So that feeling is happening because we're being activated in the moment. So that's why slow breathing works. It's saying you're faking it sort of into saying, actually, if she's taking slow breaths, there must be no threat. Therefore, it must be rest and digest time. So that's that's happening there. The middle part of our brain is formed towards the end of I was going to say labor. Oh my goodness! Towards the end of pregnancy, it could be happening there too, and it can be shaped there actually. But and in the early months is the amygdala and the hypothalamus, and in there is our alarm system for safety and our memories. And why that's there in early childhood is, as humans, we cannot survive without a parent, right? We're one of the animal species that doesn't get up and pick up a glass of milk and go, right, lads, we're good to go. If we don't have another human to take care of us, to meet our needs, we can't survive. So we're a very tribal species. And so we cry when we need. We cry when we're wet. We cry when we're hungry. We cry when we're in pain. So the amygdala helps this alarm system. But of course, it goes on through life being the piece that tells us when there's danger and when there's threat. And part of it is social. So if we think we're going to be excluded from the tribe, then we react in certain ways where we go, okay, I'm afraid that these people are going to give out to me. So then we avoid them. Or we're insecure and we try and hold on to people and please people to stay with them. So we overly accommodate others. We ignore our own needs. We overly accommodate others in order to stay in the tribe.
That's like people pleasing, right?
Yes, yes, yeah. And then later in life, in the first 18 months, the right brain develops, and in there we have a lot more of our emotional, our creative right brain, and our connection with people grows in there. And then our left brain, which is really language and speech, only comes at 18, 14, 15 months, maybe 18 months to 3 years, So words like, fear or anxiety don't exist in our vocabulary when we're young, when we're an infant, but yet we are actually able to experience them.
Yeah.
But they're pre-verbal. So
I
this is how that early pace informs us, but also as we go through life, all these pieces still become activated and because the brain develops, and yet the functionality is the same as it is maybe when we're 18 months to 3 years old. Does
think
that make
that,
sense?
yeah, that's the analogy of the phone and version one. I mean, that's just fantastic because, it just, that makes it very accessible, I think, to understand. And I think that's one thing that I always kind of say to women is it's so important to understand and to have compassion for yourself in
Yes.
terms of understand how you're reacting. It is in a way, it's a survival safety mechanism that's being kicked in. And at the same time, you've got to bring in the fact that if this hormonal roller coaster is also happening. So it means that, so many times women will say, like you said earlier, it's a disproportionate response, but then they'll always say, I feel so bad after it. They feel guilty
Mm,
after the rage or frustration.
mm,
But I think if you can, go back, bring that awareness, and even just think, hey, I'm operating on version one. I'm in that survival mode. Straight
yeah.
away, there's huge relief in that.
Yeah. And one thing you're highlighting, Catherine, there that is that negative inner critic voice or
Mm.
inner dialogue. That's so detrimental to many women where they get in their own heads and think, I should be this and I should be that and I should be coping better and I should be, getting the
Wonder
kids
Woman.
out here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, I don't look the way everybody else does. I don't look the way I used to look. I don't have the
Mm.
energy, this negativity towards the self. It actually inflames anxiety, really
Mm.
inflames it. You not only have the overwhelming scenarios, you have the chemical imbalance, but you also then have this negative voice that's saying you're not good enough. You're not
Yeah.
doing it well enough. Everybody else is doing it better than you, or everyone else looks better than you. Your sense of taste in clothes has changed, and all of a sudden you don't know how to dress because you're in your 50s and you're going, well, I can't wear what I wore when I was 30 and the wardrobe hasn't updated much since. And, and again, you're going, oh, now I look a heap. And so, again, it's that negative self-belief that keeps piling in with all of these thoughts. And actually, if we can have compassion, going, well, how would you know what to wear? It's the first time you've been in your 50s,
Yeah.
or, yes, this is tricky. And yeah, I overreacted, but you know what? I'm doing my best at this time. And what was
Yeah.
that about?
Mm.
There's a real reverse psychology to the compassion that the more compassionate, the harder you are on yourself, the more you'll increase your anxiety. The gentler and more compassionate and more understanding you are of yourself, the less intensity there will be to your anxiety. So it's actually, if you using the small child in a supermarket analogy, the more you shout at the child and tell them to stop crying, the more they're going to roar. And that's like your self-negative thought. The more you give out to yourself for not being what you should be, the more the anxiety is going to heighten. The more you let that child have its moment, let it go through whatever cycle of emotional state it's in, and then say, what's going on? What is it that you need? Why are you feeling this way? Same to ourselves as adults. What's going on for me right now? What's activating me, and where might that be coming from? What can I do for myself that would make me feel better in this moment? The less harsh we are and the more caring and understanding that this whole piece is complex, then the more able we will be to bring down the anxiety, because it'll feel less threatening, even from our own head. And that's a vital piece in sorting out anxiety. Vital piece is that self-compassion and reducing the negative self-taught.
What about the majority of women, right, are juggling 50 things when this is happening? So what about you're in work, you're really busy, you're managing your menopause symptoms, and you're trying to get that awareness in?
Yeah, it's
Any
really,
practical tips in terms of, how you can do that?
I think with women in this age category from, early 40s onwards, is we know life is changing and transitioning, and there's a lot going on, parents getting elderly and children moving to, into teens and beyond. And so there is a little bit of taking stock. Where am I at? Because I think sometimes what's behind all of that, Catherine, is meaning and purpose. And there's so many things going on that the individual finds it hard to know, well, what about me in all of this? Is this for everyone else? Where's this treadmill going? And now I'm feeling burnt out while I'm on it. And so that sort of demand of life and being able to take a step back and get a bit of perspective going, am I happy to be in this career for the next 20 years till I'm 65? Or do I need to do something else? Or what intensity does it need to be at? Or how are all these other places in my life working? And where do I need support? And where do I need to let go of some things? We all only have 24 hours in the day. No one has more, no one has less. And it is about, how do you divide that pie? I often use a pie chart in terms of thinking about our emotions during a day: happy, sadness, fear, anger, anxiety. What proportion of it are you spending in one place? And is that okay for you? You look at your day. What can you start doing? What can you stop doing? There is no magic bullet, but there is maybe that need to take a step back and evaluate where you are and make sure that that has meaning and purpose for you at that point.
I think it's prioritizing yourself, isn't it? And it is just saying, okay, I'm going to take 2 minutes now. I'm going to go to the restroom. I'm going to sit in my office, sit in my car, wherever, and I'm going to just try and just bring awareness to this. And yes, it might be uncomfortable, but if you start, that's one thing that I started doing a couple of years ago. And the power in it, oh my Lord, just unbelievable. And I think I have found I understand myself so much more now than I would have done maybe 5, 10 years ago, because I've really concentrated when those uncomfortable moments happen, which we all have, just to try and sit with it and just understand, okay, what's going on here for me? What's being triggered?
Yeah. The things I would recommend to clients are where they find their minds are very active and they're buzzing all the time and they're trying to juggle too many things, is 5 slow, deep breaths. In through the nose and out through the mouth. And as you're breathing in, think about, I'm breathing in the oxygen, the fresh air, the green grass, the goodness. You're breathing in the goodness. And when you're breathing out, you're letting go. You're, the stress, the strain, the anxiety, the toxic body, whatever it is, that, just and if you want to grunt, do that. But you can do this in the car, at the traffic lights, or, go into the bathroom in the workplace, or wherever you can find I would say maybe 3 minutes is all it takes. And I, if you can, not when you're driving, obviously, but count it on your fingers, 1, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then hold your second finger, because the counting and the pinching of your fingers takes you out of the thoughts. It takes you out of what's for the dinner and what time will I have it and who's coming in and and I need to ring my mother and I need to get a birthday present for whoever. If you're counting and breathing, you're in the moment with your breath. You're allowing it happen in your body, and you're slowing your mind down to concentrate on just the breath, and then lifting your diaphragm. It's got to go in deep. It's got to get down to the stomach. So we're saying, oh, we're in rest and digest here. So that calmness can come with it. It needs to be 5. I've noticed 4. 4, you can start to feel it changing, and it has to be 5. If you lose count of the 5 during it, go back to 1. So there is a little bit of just the rhythm of it. The counting of it is changing the pattern in your brain. And the breath is sending a signal that this is rest and digest. The other thing for fast minds or, overthinking would be the guided meditation. So you find these free on YouTube. Most of the apps like Calm or Insight Timer, there's numerous others, have a certain amount of them free for a while. But 10 minutes of doing that in the morning, if you did that 10 minutes, 5 days a week for 21 days, people would be astounded at how their brain function would change. It actually just becomes a little quieter. The pace of it becomes slower. So not that you don't think smartly, but the speed at which it races things kind of settles. It's phenomenal. I've done it a couple of times. I had to do it when I was studying at one point, and to feel the difference at the end of 21 days of how your mind is. And it's like going to the gym. You have to be intentional about these things if you want to bring about change in your anxiety. You have to have a little bit of a plan, a little bit of a goal, but set out, this is what I want to achieve. I want to slow down how I'm spinning. You have to then be in the present moment and catch some of these things, or bring them in as a practice in the morning, so that then when you're overwhelmed during the day, it become a familiar thing to lean into. It's going to be very hard to lean into something new when you're in anxiety if you never do it outside of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You've got to kind of have it there as a tool. You go, oh, I must pick that up. And then your attitude towards yourself, that openness and compassion and curiosity about, why am I activated right now? What is it about anxiety that it's coming up for me in this moment? One other interesting thing I might say to you, have you seen the new Inside Out movie?
Not yet. I know one of my sons actually is mad to see it, so I must. It's probably Disney now at this stage, but I did see the first one and I loved it. I
Yes.
absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I went to see it recently, and I would encourage any of you who haven't seen it as adults, go with your friends. Like there's so much in it. It's not a kids animation movie, as none of the Disney ones are.
Yeah.
There's always meaning in them. But watch for the character that's anxiety. Okay, I don't want to give the plot away, but it comes in and it has a fairly central role. But I'm just going to say, notice how it impacts the other emotions. It sort of hijacks a little. And that happens to us all. It's hard. It's almost, for ourselves, it's almost like, if I'm anxious, then I can't notice my anger or my fears. And I don't take time. I just see this blur and this whizzing, but I can't actually really connect with the deeper emotions that are going on for me. And that's a big part of what happens in menopause, I think, because the stage women are at in life, the sandwich years, and your little shot on that on social media the other day with all the sliced pans was brilliant. It's what am I about, and what am I doing, and why does any of this matter, and what's bothering me from what has happened in the past, and can I make peace with that, or why is it active right now? So it's the making figuring out our past and figuring out how we are in the present and where we're going in the future, and containing the anxiety around that so that we know that we are enough and that we can figure our way through it.
And I think that's really powerful, that we are enough, because I think a lot of times that's a struggle in terms of because like you said earlier, it's like you nearly have this pressure that you need to be Superwoman, Wonder Woman, but it's actually understanding that you are enough. And I think, and you know me, that I'm very positive about menopause, but I think that the huge opportunities that come with the menopause years is the fact that we are being pushed, we are being encouraged to look. I always kind of say it's like we're looking in the mirror. Who am I? Where am I at? What am I at? What am I doing? And that can be very uncomfortable because it's shifting sands, everything is changing, and we're being asked to kind of do a very deep and profound check in with ourselves. And I think for some of us, that can be very uncomfortable. And there can also be the resistance to doing it. And I think, I think there's a saying there, if you resist, I don't know, it's something like that, isn't it? If you resist too much, it'll still persist. And I think menopause, to me, aside from the future proofing aspects of menopause, I think the spotlight it puts on our needs to have a check-in and to understand, well, where am I going? Am I happy? Am I content with my life? And I think happy is a very loaded word, but I could talk for an hour on that one. But it's more about like, am I content with where I'm at in my life right now? And I think that's where, I just think that's where, menopause, if we're willing to take that invitation, probably a strong word, but it's like that is a great opportunity. And I know certainly from my own perspective, I've probably learned more about myself in the last 5 to 8 years than I've done previously. And that's where we get into the whole thought and thinking about the wisdom of menopause.
Yeah. I really agree with everything you said there, Catherine. And, I one of my, depending on the presentation, but one of the ways I work with people in therapy, I feel, is to be that, hold up that mirror. And you go into a changing room and you look at the different angles, the side and this side and that side, and that's what I'm trying to do, is reflect back to people, where they're being hard on themselves. It's like, okay, but what about this? What about this perspective of what you've been through? Can you see yourself in a different light? Or, look at how much you're carrying. How would you think if a friend was carrying that? What would you say to them? Or, this is your environment. This is what's going on for you. Does this fit? Is this how you want it to be? This is your pie chart. How much of it is invested in these places? Is that okay? And it's by asking those questions and helping people to reflect on where they are, or maybe challenging gently, or, normalizing some of what, actually nobody has it all together.
No, nobody, nobody, not even Michelle Obama, Oprah, none of them.
No, and they quite openly admit it, so it's like, okay, it's reflecting back to say, well, how, where people's thinking have got a little distorted or a little one-sided, or one of the things with fear and anxiety is that when you're in fight or flight mode, your vision narrows. So instead of being able to see peripheral vision, you go, okay, there's a tiger in front of me. But your brain narrows too. It goes, will I run or stay? Will I climb that tree or will I run behind that rock? It's not going to go, God, there's a beautiful view here and there's a nice sunset, but there's a tiger about to eat me. So your creativity goes offline. the thinking about resources and options and choices goes offline. It's very much like a light switch, run or stay. So when we're in anxiety mode, we're not at our creative best, coming up with solutions, coming up with problem solving. So I find that in therapy, that slowing down and saying, okay, but what else could be true? Or if you rate this on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is it to occur? And if it were to occur, how likely are you to be able to manage it? And actually, when people slow down, when they're breathing calmly, and when they're in a room with somebody who's supportive, and they suddenly go, oh yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, no, I could choose this instead. So again, you know, that piece of taking time to step back, as you say, to maybe look at what they're doing through a new lens, to see life through a new lens, to see options through a new lens, to not feel as contained or as caught. You know, yes, I know it's hard for some people out there and it's very difficult, but in some ways, looking at the choices of sitting into where you are with a greater sense of acceptance, maybe, in a content acceptance rather than a frustrated acceptance, with an acceptance of I'm choosing to sit in here rather than I'm resisting it and fighting it and annoyed about it, and looking at, you know, and I know this frustrates people sometimes, but the privilege or the gratitude we might have for some of where we're at, even while some of it is difficult. You know, where is the glass somewhat half full and where is it not? And you know, I don't want to be too Pollyanna about this and saying, oh, you know, it's all happy clappy. You know, it is a time when a lot of people can lose parents or other members of the family, and there is sadness. But sometimes the anxiety is stopping us feeling the sadness and grief that we need to connect with, that we need to process, that we need to move through. So keeping busy stops us from actually just being sad for what we've lost. And they're two very different emotions in our body. But if we can allow the sadness to take its space and acknowledge the love we've had for something we've lost, that's so much healthier than being busy avoiding ourselves because we're run ragged and not feeling the space we need for the tough emotions. I've probably diverged a little bit in that piece there, Catherine, but
I mean, the message is compassion.
it
The
is.
message is, it's compassion, it's pausing, and it's slowing down. And I think if you know, I loved what you were saying there earlier about the 10 minutes a day for 21 days, because I know myself at the moment, you talked about the gym, but I am doing a new gym exercise just on my thighs. I've committed to it for, you know, 2-3 minutes a day for 21 days, so I can see the difference. But it's minutes, if you take it out of the bigger scheme of the 24-hour clock, that are so pivotal in supporting, you know, our journeys at any stage of life, but I think especially when we're having challenges as we go through menopause. I think thanks so much for all the insight, and there's so many great takeaways from today. And I think the number one is I'm going off to watch Inside Out.
I think there's the self-care piece of, you know, the downtime in the cinema, as well as it being sort of a semi-educational psychological movie.
Well, I guess maybe the few treats, maybe the pistachio ice cream and the popcorn or
There
whatever.
you go. Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Dee, and I'll put all your details in the show notes so everyone can connect with you.
Super. Thank you very much, Catherine. Thanks for having me.